Top 20 Conservationist Interview Questions and Answers. Explore the top 20 conservationist interview questions and answers designed to showcase your expertise, field skills, and passion for sustainability in today's evolving environmental and ecological landscape. 1. What inspired you to pursue a career in conservation? My passion for conservation was sparked during a school trip to a wildlife reserve where I witnessed both the beauty of biodiversity and the threats it faced. Seeing deforestation and species decline firsthand motivated me to take action. I began volunteering with local environmental NGOs, which deepened my understanding of ecological interdependence and human impact. Over time, I realized that conservation offered a meaningful way to blend science with advocacy, and I committed to this path. I'm driven by the belief that protecting our natural heritage is essential for future generations and the health of our planet. 2. How do you stay updated on the latest conservation research and policies? I stay current through a combination of peer-reviewed journals, conservation newsletters, webinars, and professional networks. I regularly read publications like Conservation Biology, Frontos in Ecology and the Environment, and Nature Conservancy. I also participate in global conservation forums, attend virtual conferences, and follow updates from organizations such as the IUCN, WWF, and UNEP. Subscribing to academic mailing lists and being part of professional groups on LinkedIn help me keep track of new methodologies and policy changes. Continuous learning ensures my work is evidence-based and aligned with the latest global conservation strategies. 3. What do you believe is the biggest challenge facing conservation today? The biggest challenge facing conservation today is balancing human development with ecosystem preservation. Rapid urbanization, agricultural expansion, and resource extraction are degrading habitats at alarming rates. Compounding this is climate change, which alters ecosystems unpredictably. Additionally, there's a lack of political will, inconsistent policy enforcement, and insufficient funding for long-term projects. These challenges are interconnected, and solutions must be multifaceted, combining scientific research, community engagement, and sustainable development. Conservation cannot succeed in isolation. It must be integrated into social, economic, and political frameworks. Bridging this gap is critical for effective and lasting environmental protection. 4. Can you explain a conservation project or initiative that you admire and why? I deeply admire the Snow Leopard Trust's community-based conservation program in Central Asia. Rather than imposing top-down restrictions, the initiative partners with local herders to promote coexistence and reduce retaliatory killings. By offering alternative income sources like ecotourism and handicraft sales, the program aligns community livelihoods with species protection. It also integrates scientific research, such as camera trapping and population monitoring, to inform policy. This model exemplifies how conservation and development can work hand in hand. It's inspiring because it demonstrates empathy, sustainability, and measurable results, creating a blueprint for future wildlife conservation efforts in human-dominated landscapes. 5. What field research techniques are you proficient in, for example, GIS, wildlife tracking, habitat assessment? I am proficient in several field research techniques, including GIS mapping for habitat analysis and land use planning, camera trapping for wildlife monitoring, and radio telemetry for tracking animal movements. I have experience conducting biodiversity surveys, bird point counts, and vegetation assessments. I am skilled in using tools such as GPS devices, rangefinders, and data loggers. I also utilize quadrat sampling and transect methods for flora and fauna studies. My technical skills are complemented by rigorous data recording, ensuring the accuracy and reliability of field data. These techniques have been essential in guiding conservation strategies and evaluating ecosystem health. 6. Describe your experience with data collection and analysis in conservation work. I have led and contributed to multiple data collection initiatives, including biodiversity assessments, species population monitoring, and habitat quality evaluations. I utilize standardized protocols to ensure data consistency and validity. After fieldwork, I clean, analyze, and visualize data using tools like Excel, R, and QGIS. I have also worked on long-term monitoring datasets, helping identify population trends and habitat changes. My analysis has informed conservation actions such as protected area design, species management plans, and community outreach strategies. I always ensure that my findings are communicated clearly to stakeholders through reports, presentations, and collaborative review sessions. 7. Have you worked with endangered species? What was your role in their protection? Yes, I've worked with endangered sea turtles in a coastal conservation program. My role involved monitoring nesting sites, collecting biometric data, tagging individuals for migration tracking, and engaging local communities in nest protection efforts. I also participated in beach cleanups to reduce plastic pollution, a major threat to turtles. Additionally, I helped design educational workshops for local schools and fishing communities to raise awareness. Our team collaborated with local authorities to enforce anti-poaching laws. This hands-on experience taught me the importance of integrating science, policy, and community engagement in species protection efforts. 8. How do you assess the health of an ecosystem or habitat? Assessing ecosystem health involves a multi-indicator approach. I analyze biodiversity levels, presence of indicator species, and habitat integrity through vegetation surveys and wildlife observations. Water and soil quality testing provide insights into pollution levels and nutrient cycling. I also assess human impacts, such as land use changes or invasive species. Satellite imagery and GIS help detect habitat fragmentation and changes over time. In aquatic systems, I evaluate parameters like dissolved oxygen and macroinvertebrate populations. Combining field data with ecological models allows for a comprehensive understanding of ecosystem functionality, resilience, and restoration needs. 9. Tell me about a time you had to solve a challenging problem during a conservation project. During a wetland restoration project, we encountered local resistance due to fears that conservation would restrict farming activities. To address this, I facilitated community meetings to understand concerns and provided evidence-based presentations on long-term benefits like flood control and sustainable livelihoods. We co-developed a plan that included seasonal water retention zones and alternative income strategies such as beekeeping. By involving local voices and offering tangible benefits, we gained their support and successfully restored over 50 hectares of degraded wetland. This experience highlighted the power of communication, empathy, and adaptive planning in overcoming challenges. 10. How would you handle conflicts between local communities and conservation goals? I believe in inclusive, participatory approaches to resolve conflicts between communities and conservation. First, I engage stakeholders in open dialogue to understand their needs, fears, and cultural values. I then work to identify mutual benefits, such as ecotourism, sustainable agriculture, or employment in conservation programs. Co-management frameworks, where communities have a say in planning and implementation, build trust and accountability. I also prioritize transparency and regular communication to prevent misunderstandings. Education plays a key role in demonstrating long-term environmental and economic gains. Ultimately, successful conservation depends on community ownership and equitable solutions that respect both people and nature. 11. Describe a situation where you had to adapt your conservation strategy due to unexpected conditions, for example, climate change, funding cuts. While managing a reforestation initiative, we faced severe drought conditions that caused high sapling mortality. Our original planting strategy was no longer viable. We quickly adapted by switching to native drought-resistant species and revised our planting schedule to align with rainfall forecasts. We also implemented water-saving techniques like mulch layering and drip irrigation. Simultaneously, we secured additional microfunding from a local environmental trust to sustain operations. This experience underscored the importance of flexibility in conservation and highlighted how adaptive management and climate forecasting tools can help mitigate environmental uncertainty and ensure project continuity. 12. How do you involve local communities in conservation efforts? I involve local communities through education, employment, and empowerment. First, I organize awareness sessions to explain the ecological and economic benefits of conservation. Then, I work with community leaders to identify sustainable livelihood options tied to conservation, like ecotourism, sustainable harvesting, or crafts. I ensure that locals are directly involved in data collection, habitat restoration, and monitoring activities. This inclusion fosters ownership and long-term stewardship. I also support capacity building by offering training workshops. When communities see themselves as custodians of nature rather than bystanders, conservation outcomes improve significantly and become more resilient to external pressures. 13. Have you worked with government agencies or NGOs on conservation projects? What was your role? Yes, I collaborated with both NGOs and government agencies on multiple conservation projects. For example, with an NGO-led forest conservation initiative, I coordinated field surveys, organized community workshops, and contributed to drafting policy recommendations. When working with a government forestry department, I helped assess the ecological health of protected areas and co-designed habitat corridors to reduce wildlife conflict. My role often included liaising between stakeholders, reporting progress, and ensuring compliance with legal and environmental standards. These collaborations taught me the importance of aligning grassroots efforts with institutional support for effective and scalable conservation outcomes. 14. How would you communicate the importance of conservation to someone unfamiliar with the topic? I would use relatable, real-life examples to explain how conservation impacts daily life. For instance, I'd highlight how forests purify air, wetlands prevent floods, and bees pollinate crops. I avoid jargon and instead use stories, like how conserving mangroves save a coastal village from a storm surge. I also emphasize the economic benefits of ecosystem services and sustainable resource use. Visual tools like infographics or videos can make complex ideas easier to grasp. Ultimately, I tailor my message to the audience's values, whether that's health, livelihood, or future generations, to make conservation personally relevant and compelling. 15. How do you balance economic development with conservation needs? Balancing development with conservation requires integrated planning and stakeholder dialogue. I advocate for sustainable development models that align economic incentives with environmental health. This includes promoting ecotourism, agroforestry, and renewable energy initiatives that generate income while protecting ecosystems. Environmental impact assessments are critical in ensuring that development projects minimize damage and incorporate restoration measures. I also support the use of economic tools like payment for ecosystem services, PES, to reward conservation-friendly practices. By presenting data that shows long-term economic losses from environmental degradation, I help policymakers and developers make informed, balanced decisions. 16. What ethical considerations do you keep in mind when working on conservation projects? Ethical conservation respects both ecological and human dimensions. I prioritize informed consent when working with indigenous or local communities and ensure transparency in decision-making. I avoid imposing solutions and instead co-develop plans that reflect local needs and knowledge. I am also cautious about unintended consequences, such as restricting traditional land uses without alternatives, which could harm livelihoods. Species interventions must consider ecosystem balance, avoiding actions that benefit one species at another's expense. I also ensure that data collection respects wildlife welfare and privacy standards. Conservation must be fair, inclusive, and ecologically sound to be truly ethical. 17. What do you consider your greatest achievement in conservation so far? My greatest achievement was leading a community-driven river restoration project that revived a degraded watershed. The river, once choked with waste, became a clean, flowing habitat supporting fish and birds again. I coordinated between local government, NGOs, and villages to remove invasive species, plant native vegetation, and install erosion control barriers. We also initiated waste segregation programs and built eco-awareness among school children. The project's success lay in its community ownership and ecological impact. It restored biodiversity and improved water quality for thousands. It showed me that collaborative, well-structured conservation efforts can yield lasting, visible results. 18. How do you handle working in remote or physically demanding environments? I am well prepared both mentally and physically to work in challenging environments. I maintain fitness through regular exercise and am trained in outdoor safety, including first aid and navigation. I always plan thoroughly, packing appropriate gear, researching local conditions, and securing communication protocols. I stay adaptable and maintain a positive mindset, even when conditions are tough. I also understand the importance of teamwork and looking out for others in the field. These experiences have strengthened my resilience and deepened my respect for nature, reinforcing my commitment to conservation work regardless of the conditions. 19. Describe a time you worked in a team to achieve a conservation goal. What was your contribution? During a reforestation campaign, I worked with a team of ecologists, volunteers, and community members to plant 20,000 native trees. My role included mapping degraded areas using GIS, selecting appropriate species based on soil and climate, and training volunteers in planting techniques. I also led post-planting monitoring to assess survival rates and suggest improvements. Clear communication and task coordination ensured smooth execution. The collaborative spirit and shared commitment were inspiring. Our joint efforts restored critical habitat, improved soil stability, and reconnected fragmented wildlife corridors. The project demonstrated how teamwork amplifies conservation impact. 20. Where do you see the future of conservation in the next 10 years, and how do you plan to contribute? Over the next decade, I see conservation becoming more integrated with climate action, technology, and community empowerment. Biodiversity will be recognized not only as a moral priority but as essential to climate resilience and human well-being. I plan to contribute by advancing data-driven conservation using GIS, remote sensing, and citizen science platforms. I also want to focus on policy advocacy and education to influence systemic change. Building partnerships across disciplines and borders will be crucial. My goal is to help mainstream conservation into all areas of development and inspire the next generation of environmental stewards. Mastering these top 20 conservationist interview questions and answers will help you confidently demonstrate your field expertise, problem-solving abilities, and commitment to environmental protection. Use these insights to effectively communicate your qualifications and passion, ensuring you leave a strong impression on potential employers in the conservation and sustainability sectors.